The space station called HFY floated in the darkness between two dying stars. It was old. It was dirty. It was dangerous. But for those who wanted to disappear, or for those who wanted to find things that could not be found anywhere else, it was perfect. Ziravan walked through the crowded market with her hood pulled low over her face. Her skin was violet, smooth like polished stone, and her eyes were silver with no pupils. She was Villani, one of the oldest and most powerful species in the galaxy. Her father was High Commander Vareth, a man who controlled entire star systems. She was royalty, but here, in this place, royalty meant nothing. Here, only strength mattered. She had come to HFY for one reason. She needed a bodyguard. Not one of her father's soldiers, who could be bought or threatened. Not a mercenary, who would sell her location to the highest bidder. She needed someone loyal. Someone who would fight for her and her alone. Her contact had told her about the fighting pits beneath the station. "You want a warrior?" he had said. "Go watch them fight. You will find what you need there." So she went. The underground arena was carved into the metal bones of the station itself. Thousands of aliens sat in rising rows around a circular pit. The air smelled like blood and sweat and fear. Ziravan found a spot on one of the observation platforms, high above the crowd, where she could watch without being seen. The fights were brutal. She watched a creature with 4 arms tear apart a smaller opponent. She watched 2 insect-like beings slash at each other until one stopped moving. She watched and waited, but none of the fighters impressed her. They were savage, yes, but savagery was not what she needed. Then the announcer's voice crackled through the speakers. "Next fight. A special treat for you all. We have a human." The crowd laughed. Some of them booed. Others made sounds of pity. Ziravan leaned forward slightly. Humans. She had heard of them, of course. Everyone had. They were a young species from a small blue planet on the edge of the galaxy. They had only discovered faster-than-light travel a few hundred years ago. In galactic terms, they were babies. They were also considered weak. They had no claws, no fangs, no venom, no natural armor. Their bodies were soft and broke easily. Most species in the galaxy wondered how humans had survived at all on their home world. A door opened at the far end of the arena, and a man was pushed through it. He stumbled, caught himself, and stood up straight. He was not tall. He was not large. He had brown hair that was messy and dirty, and a face covered in bruises. He wore the torn uniform of a cargo ship worker. His hands were empty. He had no weapons. His name, according to the announcer, was Jake Lawson. He had been caught stealing food from a merchant. The punishment for theft on HFY was death, but the arena masters had offered him a choice. Die quickly in an execution room, or die slowly in the pit for the entertainment of others. He had chosen the pit. Ziravan felt a small twist of pity in her chest. This man was going to die. There was no question about it. The only question was how long he would last. Then the other door opened. The creature that walked through it was a Korthek. It stood 8 feet tall, covered in scales that were harder than most metals. Its claws were 6 inches long and sharp enough to cut through steel. Its eyes were yellow and filled with hunger. Kortheks were killing machines. They came from a death world, a planet where everything wanted to eat everything else. They had evolved to be perfect predators. The human had no chance. The crowd screamed with excitement. They wanted blood. They wanted to watch the soft little human get torn apart. Jake Lawson stood in the center of the arena. He looked at the Korthek. He looked at the screaming crowd. He looked at the walls around him. Searching for an exit he would not find. Then he did something strange. He smiled. Ziravan blinked. She had expected fear. She had expected panic. She had expected the man to drop to his knees and beg for mercy. But he smiled. It was a small smile, tired and grim, but it was real. The Korthok roared and charged. Its feet shook the ground as it ran. Its claws were raised, ready to slash, ready to kill. The distance between them closed in seconds. Jake did not run at the last moment. Just before those terrible claws reached him, he moved. It was not a big movement. He simply stepped to the side, turned his body, and let the Korthok rush past him. As the creature passed, Jake grabbed its arm and pulled. The Korthok's own speed worked against it. Its momentum carried it forward while Jake pulled it sideways. The creature lost its balance and crashed into the arena wall with a sound like thunder. The crowd went silent. The Korthok pushed itself up from the ground. It was confused. It was angry. It turned to face the human again, and this time it did not charge blindly. It moved slowly, circling, watching Jake circled with it. His hands were raised in front of him, not in fists, but open and ready. His eyes never left the Korthok's body. The creature attacked again, slashing with one massive claw. Jake ducked under it. The Korthok swung with its other arm. Jake stepped back, just far enough to avoid it. The creature lunged forward, trying to grab him. Jake dropped low and drove his fist into the soft spot beneath the Korthok's arm. Where the scales were thinner, the Korthok howled in pain. Ziravan stood up from her seat. Her heart was beating faster now. This was impossible. This should not be happening. The human was fighting back. Not just surviving. Fighting. The Korthok was getting angry now. It attacked with wild fury, swinging and slashing and trying to crush the small creature that kept hurting it. But Jake was always moving, always just out of reach. And every time the Korthok left an opening, Jake struck. He hit the creature's knee, making it stumble. He hit its throat, making it choke. He hit its eyes, making it blind with pain. Blood was running down Jake's face now. One of the Korthok's claws had caught him above the eye. His ribs were cracked from a blow that had knocked him across the arena. But he would not stop. Ziravan watched as this impossible human, this soft and weak creature from a nothing planet, slowly and methodically took apart a monster that should have killed him in seconds. And when the Korthok finally fell, when it collapsed to the ground and did not get up, the arena was completely silent. Jake stood over the fallen creature, his chest heaving, his fist still raised. He was covered in blood. He was barely standing, but he was alive. Ziravan found herself speaking before she even knew she was going to speak. The words came out soft, almost like a prayer. I wish he was mine. She had found what she was looking for. Jake woke up in a small room that smelled like medicine and metal. The ceiling above him was gray. The lights were too bright. His whole body hurt. He tried to sit up, but his ribs screamed at him, and he fell back onto the hard bed. He lay there for a moment, breathing slowly, trying to remember what had happened. The arena. The Korthok. The fight. He was alive. Somehow, he was alive. A small machine floated near his head. It made soft beeping sounds as it sprayed something cold onto the cuts on his face. The pain faded slightly wherever the spray touched. Some kind of medical drone. He guessed. Jake turned his head and looked around the room. It was small and dirty, with rust stains on the walls and cables hanging from the ceiling. A recovery bay for arena fighters. Not a place for healing. Just a place to patch people up enough so they could fight again or die in the next match. The door slid open with a hiss, and Jake expected to see guards. He expected to be dragged back to his cell, or maybe straight to another fight. What he did not expect was the woman who walked through the door. She was tall and slender, with violet skin that seemed to glow slightly in the dim light. Her eyes were silver, with no pupils, and they looked at him like they could see everything he was thinking. She wore armor that was black and gold, with symbols he did not recognize carved into the chest plate. Behind her stood two guards, Massive creatures carrying weapons that hummed with energy. She was clearly important. She was clearly dangerous. Jake pushed himself up onto his elbows, ignoring the pain. "Who are you?" The woman studied him for a long moment before answering. "My name is Ziravan. I am the daughter of High Commander Vorith of the Villani Empire." Jake had no idea what that meant. He had been in space for 3 years, working on cargo ships, and he still barely understood the politics of the galaxy. There were too many species, too many empires, too many old grudges and new alliances. "Okay," he said. "What do you want with me?" "I watched you fight," Ziravan said. Her voice was calm and measured, like she was discussing the weather instead of a life-or-death battle. "You defeated a Korthik with your bare hands. No weapons, no armor. That should have been impossible. I got lucky." "No." She shook her head slowly. "Luck does not explain what I saw. You read your opponent. You learned its patterns. You found its weaknesses, and you exploited them. That is not luck. That is skill." Jake said nothing. She was right, of course. He had been fighting his whole life. On Earth, he had grown up in a rough neighborhood where you learned to fight or you learned to run. He had done both. When he was old enough, he joined the military, where they taught him how to fight even better. Hand-to-hand combat, weapons training, survival skills. He had spent years learning how to hurt people and how to avoid getting hurt, but that was a long time ago. Now he was just a drifter, moving from ship to ship, trying to forget the things he had done. "Why are you here?" he asked. Ziravan moved closer to his bed. Her guards stayed by the door, watching everything. "I need protection," she said. "I am traveling to the Outer Rim. It is a long journey, and it is dangerous. My father has many enemies, and they would like very much to capture me or kill me. So hire mercenaries. There are plenty of them on this station. Mercenaries can be bought. Soldiers can be threatened. I need someone different." Her silver eyes fixed on his face. "I need someone who will fight for me no matter what. Someone who cannot be bribed or scared. Someone like you." Jake laughed, but it hurt his ribs, so he stopped. "Lady, I don't even know you. Why would I fight for you?" "Because right now, you are going to die." Ziravan's voice did not change. She spoke about his death like she was reading a report. "You won one fight. That is impressive. But the arena masters will put you against something worse next time. 2 Korthiks, perhaps. Or a Vrix hunter. Or they will simply give your opponent a weapon while you have nothing. You will die in this pit, and no one will remember your name." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Or," she continued, "you can come with me. I will buy your freedom from the arena masters. I will pay you more money than you have ever seen. And when our journey is complete, I will give you passage to any planet in the galaxy. You will be free." Jake stared at her. It was a good offer. It was a very good offer. But he had learned a long time ago that good offers usually came with hidden costs. "What's the catch?" he asked. "The catch is that you might die protecting me instead of dying in this arena." Ziravan almost smiled. "But at least you will die for something." Jake thought about it. He thought about the Korthik and how close those claws had come to taking his head off. He thought about the cell they would throw him back into, cold and dark and small. He thought about the next fight, and the one after that, and the one after that. He thought about how tired he was of just surviving. "All right," he said. "I'll do it." Ziravan nodded. If she was pleased, she did not show it. "Good. Can you walk?" "I can try." He swung his legs off the bed and stood up slowly. The room spun around him for a moment, but he grabbed the edge of the bed and held on until it stopped. His ribs were on fire. His head was pounding, but he was standing. Ziravan watched him with those strange silver eyes. "You are in pain," she said. It was not a question. "I've had worse. Have you?" Jake met her gaze. "Yeah, I have." Something changed in her expression. It was small, barely noticeable, but Jake saw it. A flicker of curiosity, a hint of respect. "Follow me," she said. "My ship is waiting." She turned and walked out of the room. Her guards fell into step behind her. Jake took a deep breath, winced at the pain in his ribs, and followed. The corridors of Cathvara were crowded and loud. Aliens of every shape and size pushed past each other, shouting in languages Jake did not understand. The air smelled like smoke and chemicals, and things he did not want to think about. People stared at Ziravan as she walked. Some of them backed away quickly, fear in their eyes. Others watched her with hunger, like predators eyeing prey. But no one approached her. No one dared. Jake walked beside her, trying to ignore the looks he was getting. A human walking with Vellani royalty. It must have been a strange sight. They reached the docking bay after what felt like hours. A ship waited there, sleek and black, with wings that curved like blades. It was beautiful and deadly, like everything else about this woman. Ziravan stopped at the bottom of the boarding ramp and turned to face him. "Once you step onto this ship, there is no going back. You will be bound to me until our journey is complete. Do you understand?" Jake looked at the ship. He looked at the station behind him, full of death and despair. He looked at Ziravan, this strange alien princess who had offered him a way out. "Yeah," he said. "I understand." He walked up the ramp and into his new life. The ship was called the Silent Blade, and it moved through space like a shadow. Jake spent the first few days learning its layout, memorizing the corridors and rooms, finding all the places where an enemy could hide and all the places where he could make a stand if he needed to. The crew was small. There was the pilot, a quiet Vellani male named Korvax, who rarely spoke to anyone except Ziravan. There was the engineer, a strange little creature with 4 arms and big, nervous eyes. His name was Pip, and he belonged to a species Jake had never heard of. He was always worried about something, always checking systems and muttering to himself about things that might go wrong. There were also 4 Vellani soldiers who served as guards. They did not like Jake. He could see it in the way they looked at him, in the way they whispered to each other when he walked past. To them, he was nothing. A human. A soft, weak creature who had no business being on a ship with Vellani royalty. Jake did not care what they thought. He had a job to do. He spent most of his time near Ziravan. That was his purpose, after all. Where she went, he went. When she ate meals in the small dining area, he stood by the door. When she met with Korvax to discuss their route, he waited in the corner, watching and listening. When she slept, he stayed outside her quarters, alert for any sign of danger. The first week passed without incident. The Silent Blade jumped from system to system, avoiding the main shipping lanes where pirates like to hunt. Ziravan explained that they were taking the long way to the Outer Rim. It was slower, but safer. "My father's enemies have spies everywhere," she told him one evening. They were sitting in the observation room, a small space with a large window that looked out at the stars. "They will be watching the normal routes. If we stay hidden, we might reach our destination without being found. And if we are found?" Jake asked. "Then you will earn your payment." Jake nodded. He understood. That was the deal. He started training the next day. The ship had a small cargo hold that was mostly empty, and Jake turned it into his personal gym. He had no weights, so he used crates. He had no punching bag, so he wrapped cloth around a support beam and used that instead. He ran laps around the hold until his lungs burned. He did push-ups until his arm shook. He practiced the combat forms he had learned years ago, the movements coming back to him slowly, like remembering an old song. Ziravan came to watch him sometimes. She would stand in the doorway, her silver eyes following his movements, saying nothing. At first, Jake found it strange. Then he got used to it. "Why do you train so hard?" She asked him one day. "You are already stronger than most species in the galaxy." Jake stopped mid-punch and looked at her. Sweat was dripping down his face. His knuckles were raw from hitting the beam. "Humans aren't stronger than most species," he said. "We're actually pretty weak compared to a lot of you. And yet you defeated a Korthik. That's different." Jake wiped his face with his shirt. "Korthiks are strong, but they're stupid. They rely on their size and their claws. They don't think. They just attack. If you can stay calm, if you can read their movements, you can beat them." Ziravan tilted her head slightly. "And where did you learn to do that? To read an opponent's movements?" Jake was quiet for a moment. He did not like talking about his past, but there was something about Ziravan Esques that made it hard to lie. "On Earth," he said finally. "My home planet. I grew up in a place where you had to fight to survive. Later, I joined the military. They taught me how to fight better, how to survive longer. Your planet sounds dangerous." Jake almost laughed. "You have no idea. Earth is a death world by galactic standards. Extreme weather, predators everywhere, diseases that can kill you in days. Humans have been fighting just to stay alive since the beginning. We don't have claws or armor or venom. All we have is our brains and our stubbornness." Ziravan was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "I think I underestimated your species. Most people do." She turned and walked away without another word. But Jake noticed that after that day, she looked at him differently. Not like a tool she had bought. More like something she was trying to understand. 2 weeks into the journey, they had their first real problem. Jake was sleeping in his small cabin when the ship shook violently. Alarms started screaming. Red lights flashed in the corridor outside his door. He was on his feet in seconds, his body moving before his brain fully woke up. He ran to the bridge and found chaos. Korvax was shouting orders. The soldiers were grabbing weapons. Through the front window, Jake could see another ship, black and angular, firing beams of light at them. "Pirates," Ziravan said. She was standing in the center of the bridge, calm as always, but Jake could see tension in the way she held herself. "They found us? How?" Korvax demanded. "We were careful. We stayed off the main routes. It doesn't matter how. They're here." Ziravan turned to look at Jake. "Can you fight?" "Always." The pirate ship was faster than the Silent Blade. Running was not an option. They would have to stand and fight, or be destroyed. "They'll try to board us," Ziravan said. "They want me alive. I'm worth more as a hostage than as a corpse." "Then we stopped them at the airlock," Jake said. "Funnel them into a narrow space. Make them come at us one at a time." Korvax looked at him with surprise. The soldiers looked at him with disbelief. But Ziravan just nodded. "Do it," she said. Jake grabbed a weapon from one of the soldiers. It was some kind of energy pistol, smaller than he would have liked, but better than nothing. Then he ran to the main airlock, where the pirates would try to break through. The 4 Velani soldiers followed him, their faces grim. Whatever they thought of him before, they were professionals. When the fighting started, personal feelings did not matter. They reached the airlock just as the pirates began cutting through. Sparks flew from the metal door as some kind of torch burned through it. The air filled with the smell of melting steel. "Get ready," Jake said. The door fell inward with a crash, and the pirates poured through. They were Krixan, a reptilian species known for their brutality. They carried curved blades and projectile weapons. There were at least a dozen of them, maybe more. Jake fired his pistol, dropping the first one. Then the second. Then the third. The narrow corridor forced the pirates into a line. just as he had planned. They could not use their numbers against him, but there were too many of them. They kept coming, climbing over the bodies of their fallen comrades, pushing forward with savage determination. Jake's pistol ran out of charge. He threw it at a pirate's face, then grabbed the creature's blade as it stumbled out. Now he was fighting with a sword. He moved through the pirates, like water through rocks, cutting and slashing and ducking and weaving. The Villani soldiers fought beside him, their energy weapons flashing in the dim light. Bodies piled up at the airlock entrance. A blade caught Jake across the arm, opening a deep gash. He ignored it. Another pirate slammed into him, knocking him against the wall. He drove his stolen sword through its chest and pushed the body away. The fight lasted minutes, but it felt like hours. When the last pirate fell, Jake was covered in blood. Some of it was his. Most of it was not. The corridor was filled with bodies. The Villani soldiers were still standing, though two of them had wounds that would need treatment. They looked at Jake with something new in their eyes. Not disbelief anymore. Something closer to respect. Ziravan appeared at the end of the corridor. She walked through the carnage like she was walking through a garden, stepping carefully over the bodies. She stopped in front of Jake and looked at him. At the blood on his face. At the sword in his hand. At the wound on his arm that was dripping red onto the floor. "You're hurt," she said. "I'll live." She reached out and touched his arm, just below the cut. Her fingers were cool against his skin. "You saved my ship. You saved my crew. You saved me." Jake shrugged, then winced because shrugging hurt. "That's the job." Ziravan looked at him for a long moment. Then she did something Jake did not expect. She smiled. It was small and brief, but it was real. "Yes," she said softly. "I suppose it is." She turned and walked back toward the bridge, leaving Jake standing among the dead. He looked down at the sword in his hand, then dropped it to the floor. His arm was starting to throb now, the pain cutting through the fading adrenaline. But he was alive. And so was she. That was all that mattered. After the pirate attack, things changed on the Silent Blade. The Villani soldiers stopped looking at Jake like he was an insect. They nodded at him when he passed in the corridors. One of them, a female named Veth, even started talking to him during meals. She asked him about Earth, about humans, about how he had learned to fight the way he did. Jake answered her questions as best he could, but the biggest change was with Ziravan. She started seeking him out, not for protection, but for conversation. She would find him in the cargo hold during his training sessions, or in the observation room when he was watching the stars. She would sit near him and ask him questions about his life, his past, his world. "Tell me about Earth," she said one evening. They were in the observation room again, the stars drifting slowly past the window. The ship hummed quietly around them. Jake thought about it. "It's hard to explain," he said. "It's nothing like the other planets I've seen out here. We have oceans that cover most of the surface. Forests so big you could walk for days and never see the edge. Mountains so tall that the air at the top is too thin to breathe. It sounds beautiful. It is. It is. It's also deadly. We have storms that can flatten cities. Animals that can eat you in one bite. Earthquakes that split the ground open. And that's not even counting what humans do to each other." Ziravan tilted her head. "What do you mean?" Jake was quiet for a moment. "Humans fight," he said finally. "We always have. We fight over land, over resources, over ideas. We've been at war with ourselves since the beginning of our history. Millions of people have died in our conflicts. Maybe billions. That is terrible." "It is." Jake leaned back in his chair and looked out at the stars. "But it's also why we're so good at fighting. We've had thousands of years of practice. Every generation learns from the one before. We get better at it. more efficient, more deadly. Ziravan was silent for a long time. Then she said, "And yet you also help each other." Jake looked at her. "What do you mean?" "I saw what you did during the pirate attack. You did not just fight for yourself. You protected my soldiers. You put yourself in danger to keep them safe. That is not the behavior of a species that only knows how to destroy." Jake did not know how to answer that. She was right, in a way. Humans were complicated. They could be cruel and violent and selfish, but they could also be kind and brave and selfless. Sometimes the same person could be both things, depending on the situation. "We're not all bad," he said finally. "We just have to choose what we want to be." "And what do you choose to be?" Jake met her silver eyes. "I try to be someone worth being. I don't always succeed, but I try." Something softened in Ziravan's expression. She looked at him like she was seeing him for the first time, like she was discovering something she had not expected to find. "You are a strange creature, Jake Lawson," she said quietly. "I think I am glad I found you." The days passed, and they grew closer. Jake learned more about Ziravan and her world. He learned that she was the youngest daughter of the High Commander, and that she had always felt overshadowed by her older siblings. He learned that she was traveling to the Outer Rim to meet with representatives from a species that her father wanted as allies. It was a diplomatic mission, but also a test. Her father wanted to see if she could handle responsibility. "He does not think I can do it," she admitted one night. "He thinks I am too soft, too trusting. He sent me on this mission, expecting me to fail." "Why would he do that?" "Because that is how Vellani prove their worth. We are tested, again and again, until we either succeed or break. My brothers and sisters all passed their tests. Now it is my turn." Jake shook his head. "That's a hard way to raise children." "It is the only way we know." Ziravan paused. "But sometimes I wonder if there is a better way. A way that does not require so much pain." "There is," Jake said. "On Earth, most parents try to protect their children. They want them to be safe and happy. They don't throw them into danger to see if they survive." That sounds nice. It is. It's not perfect. Nothing is. But it's better than what you're describing. Ziravan looked at him with those strange silver eyes. "I think I would like to see your world someday." "Maybe you will." They were only 3 days from the Outer Rim station when Pip came running to find them. The little engineer was panicking, his forearms waving in the air. "Ships," he squeaked. "Ships on the sensors. Many ships. Coming fast." Jake and Ziravan ran to the bridge. Korvax was already there, his face grim as he studied the display screens. "Vellani ships," he said. "But not ours. They belong to House Vornex." Ziravan's face went pale. "My father's enemies. How many?" Jake asked. 6, all warships. We cannot outrun them, and we cannot fight them." Jake looked at the screens. 6 ships, arranged in a pattern that blocked every escape route. They had planned this carefully. They had known exactly where the Silent Blade would be. "Someone told them," he said. "Someone on this ship." The silence that followed was heavy. The soldiers looked at each other with suspicion. Korvax gripped the controls so hard, his knuckles turned white. Pip made a frightened sound and hid behind a console. "It does not matter now," Ziravan said. Her voice was steady, but Jake could hear the fear underneath. "They are here. We must deal with what is in front of us." A voice crackled over the communication system. "Attention, Silent Blade. This is Commander Threx of House Vornex. You are surrounded. Surrender the princes, and the rest of you will be allowed to live. Resist, and you will all die." Korvax looked at Ziravan. "What do we do?" Ziravan was quiet for a moment. Then she turned to Jake. "What would you do if you were in command?" Jake thought about it. 6 warships. No way to run. No way to fight. The logical choice was to surrender and hope for mercy. But Jake had never been good at the logical choice. "We bluff," he said. "We tell them you're not on this ship. We make them think this is a decoy, and the real princess is somewhere else. It might buy us time. Time for what? I don't know yet. But time is better than dying right now." Ziravan looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Do it." Jake stepped up to the communication controls. He took a deep breath, then pressed the button to respond. "Commander Threx," he said, his voice calm and confident. "This is the Silent Blade. I regret to inform you that you have been misled. Princess Ziravan is not aboard this vessel. She departed 3 days ago on a different ship, heading in the opposite direction. You are wasting your time here." There was a pause. Then Threx's voice came back, thick with anger. "You are lying, am I? Then board us. Search every room. You will find nothing but crew and cargo." Jake paused, letting the words sink in. "But while you're searching this ship, the princess gets farther away. Every minute you waste here is a minute she uses to escape." Another pause. Jake could almost hear the commander thinking. "If you are lying," Threx said finally, "I will kill everyone on that ship." Slowly. "Understood. But I'm not lying. The princess isn't here." The communication cut off. Jake turned to find everyone staring at him. "That was either very brave or very stupid," Korvax said. "Probably both." Jake looked at Ziravan. "How long until they decide what to do?" "Minutes. Maybe less. Then we need to be ready. If they board us, we fight. If they don't, we run the moment they give us an opening." Ziravan nodded slowly. Her silver eyes were fixed on his face, and there was something in them that Jake had not seen before. Something warm. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For not giving up. For fighting when there is no hope." Jake shrugged. "That's what humans do. We're too stubborn to know when we're beaten." The minutes stretched out like hours. Everyone waited, barely breathing, watching the enemy ships on the sensors. And then, against all odds, one of the ships turned away. Then another. Then a third. They were leaving. They believed him. Korvax let out a breath he had been holding. "They're pulling back. They're going to search for the decoy ship." "Go," Jake said. Now, before they changed their minds, the Silent Blade's engines roared to life, and they shot forward toward the outer rim. Behind them, the Vallani warships scattered, searching for a princess who was right under their noses the whole time. Ziravan stood beside Jake, watching the enemy ships disappear from the sensors. She did not say anything. She did not have to. She simply reached out and took his hand. Jake looked down at their intertwined fingers. Her skin was cool against his, violet against pale. It felt strange. It felt right. He squeezed her hand gently, and she squeezed back. They still had a long way to go. They still had enemies hunting them. They still had a mission to complete. But in that moment, none of that mattered. They were alive. They were together. And for the first time in a long time, Jake felt something that might have been hope. The Outer Rim station was called Haven's Rest. It floated in the darkness at the edge of known space, a place where empires ended and the unknown began. The station was neutral ground, run by an independent council that answered to no government. It was the perfect place for a secret meeting. The Silent Blade docked without incident. The journey was almost over. Ziravan would meet with the representatives, complete her mission, and prove to her father that she was worthy of his trust. But something felt wrong. Jake sensed it the moment they stepped off the ship. The docking bay was too quiet. There were no workers loading cargo, no travelers moving between ships. The air felt heavy, like the calm before a storm. "Stay close," he said to Ziravan. She nodded. Her hand rested on the small weapon hidden beneath her cloak. The Villani soldiers spread out around them, alert and ready. They made it halfway across the docking bay before the trap was sprung. Armed figures stepped out from behind cargo containers and parked ships. Dozens of them, wearing black armor with the symbol of House Voronex on their chests. They surrounded Jake and the others, weapons raised, faces hidden behind dark helmets. A figure stepped forward from the group. He was tall for a Villani, with scars across his face and cold, dead eyes. His armor was decorated with medals and honors. This was Commander Threx, the one who had almost caught them in space. "Did you really think you could fool me?" he said. His voice was quiet and dangerous. "I knew you were lying. I sent half my fleet to chase shadows, but I came here myself. I knew you would come to complete your mission." Jake stepped in front of Ziravan. "Let her go. Take me instead." Threx laughed. It was an ugly sound without humor. "Why would I want you, human? You are nothing. A pet that the princess keeps for amusement. No, I want her. And once I have her, I will use her to destroy her father." "That's not going to happen." "Really?" Threx raised one hand, and his soldiers moved closer. "You are surrounded. Your guards are outnumbered 10 to 1. You have no weapons, no armor, no way to escape. What exactly are you going to do?" Jake looked around at the enemy soldiers. Threx was right. There was no way out of this. No clever trick, no bluff that would work. This was the end. But Jake had faced the end before, and he was still standing. "I'll tell you what I'm going to do," he said. His voice was calm, steady. "I'm going to fight. I'm going to hurt as many of your soldiers as I can before you bring me down. And while I'm doing that, my friends are going to get the princess out of here." Threx stared at him. "You would die for her?" "Yes. Why?" Jake glanced back at Ziravan. She was looking at him with wide silver eyes, her face pale. She knew what he was about to do. She knew she could not stop him, because that's what humans do. Jake said, "We fight for the people we care about, even when there's no hope, even when it's certain death. We fight anyway." He turned back to Threx. "So yeah, I'm going to die today, but I'm going to make sure it costs you." For a moment, nobody moved. The docking bay was silent, except for the distant hum of the station's engines. Then Jake attacked. He moved faster than anyone expected. He grabbed the weapon from the nearest soldier, twisted it out of their grip, and used it to knock them down. Then he was moving again, diving and rolling, striking at anyone who got too close. The Villani soldiers joined the fight. They were outnumbered, but they were elite warriors, and they fought like it. Energy blasts filled the air. Bodies fell on both sides. Jake did not try to win. He knew that was impossible. Instead, he made himself a target. He drew the enemy's attention, made them focus on him, gave the others a chance to protect Ziravan. A blast caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around. He kept fighting. A blade sliced across his ribs. He kept fighting. A soldier tackled him to the ground, and he broke the soldier's arm before pushing them away and standing up again. He was bleeding from a dozen wounds now. His vision was getting blurry. His body was screaming at him to stop, to rest, to give up. He kept fighting. Through the chaos, he saw Veth and another soldier pulling Ziravan toward a side corridor. Good. They were getting her out. That was all that mattered. Threx appeared in front of him, a long curved blade in his hand. "Impressive," the commander said. "You fight well for a human. But it is over now." Jake raised his fists. His hands were shaking. He could barely stand. But he would not kneel. He would not surrender. "Come and get me," he said. Threx lunged forward, blade flashing. Jake tried to dodge, but his body was too slow, too broken. The blade caught him across the chest, opening a deep wound. He staggered back, crashed into a cargo container, and slid to the ground. The pain was incredible. It filled his whole world, drowning out everything else. He tried to get up, but his legs would not work. He tried to raise his arms, but they were too heavy. Threx stood over him, blade raised for the killing blow. "Any last words, human?" Jake looked up at him through the blood in his eyes. He thought about Ziravan. He hoped she had made it out. He hoped she would complete her mission. He hoped she would live a good life. "Yeah," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Duck." Threx frowned. "What?" An energy blast hit Threx from behind, sending him sprawling. The blade clattered to the floor. Jake turned his head and saw Ziravan standing at the edge of the docking bay. She was holding a weapon she had taken from a fallen soldier. Her face was fierce, her silver eyes blazing with anger. She had not run. She had come back for him. "No one touches him," she said, her voice ringing across the docking bay. "He is mine." Threx tried to get up, but Ziravan shot him again. And again. And again. She did not stop until he stopped moving. Then she ran to Jake and dropped to her knees beside him. Her hands pressed against his wounds, trying to stop the bleeding. Violet tears were streaming down her face. "You fool," she said. "You stupid, stubborn fool. Why did you do that? Why did you not run?" Jake tried to smile, but it hurt too much. "I told you. Humans are too stubborn to know when we're beaten. You could have died. You almost died. Worth it." He reached up with one bloody hand and touched her face. "You're safe. That's what matters." Ziravan caught his hand and held it against her cheek. "You are the strangest creature I have ever met," she said. "You are soft and breakable, and you have no claws or armor or venom. And yet you are the bravest person I have ever known. That's humans for you." She laughed, but it came out more like a sob. "I will not let you die. Do you understand me? I will not lose you." Medical drones were arriving now, summoned by the station's automated systems. The remaining enemy soldiers were surrendering or fleeing. The fight was over. Ziravan stayed by Jake's side as the drones worked on him, sealing his wounds, pumping him full of drugs that made the pain fade to a distant echo. She held his hand the entire time. Days later, Jake woke up in a medical bay. Everything was white and clean and quiet. His body was covered in bandages, but the pain was mostly gone. Ziravan was sitting in a chair beside his bed. She looked tired, like she had not slept in days. But when she saw his eyes open, she smiled. "Welcome back," she said. "How long was I out?" 3 days. The doctors said it was a miracle you survived. They said humans are not supposed to be able to take that much damage. Jake laughed weakly. "We're tougher than we look." Ziravan leaned forward and took his hand. Her silver eyes were serious. "I completed my mission. The alliance is secured. My father is pleased. He wants me to return home. That's good. That's what you wanted." "Yes." She paused. "But I do not want to return alone." Jake looked at her. His heart was beating faster now, despite the drugs in his system. "I asked you once to stay with me as my protector," Ziravan said. "I am asking you again. But this time, I do not want you as a bodyguard. I want you as something more." "What do you mean?" "I mean that when I watched you fight in that arena, I said I wished you were mine. I did not understand what I meant then. I do now." She squeezed his hand. "Stay with me, Jake, not because I am paying you. Not because you owe me anything. Stay because you want to. Stay because I want you to." Jake looked into her eyes. He thought about everything he had been through. The arena. The pirates. The assassins. All the pain and blood and near-death experiences. And through all of it, she had been there. Fighting beside him. Believing in him. Coming back for him when anyone else would have run. "You know," he said slowly, "on Earth, we have a tradition. When someone saves your life, you owe them a debt. A big one. I did not save your life. You saved mine. That's not how I see it. Jake smiled. You pulled me out of that arena. You gave me a purpose. You gave me something worth fighting for. He turned his hand over and laced his fingers through hers. So yeah, I'll stay. Not because of any debt, but because there's nowhere else I'd rather be. Ziravan stared at him for a moment. Then she leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his. The Vellani gesture of deep respect and affection. You are mine now, she whispered. And you're mine, Jake whispered back. Outside the window, the stars burned cold and eternal. The universe was vast and dangerous and full of wonders that no human had ever seen. But in that small room, wrapped in bandages and holding the hand of an alien princess, Jake Lawson felt something he had not felt in a very long time. He felt like he was home, and somewhere across the galaxy. In arenas and space stations and warships, stories began to spread. Stories about a human who had fought bear